Hi guys, it's Shar. Welcome back to my channel, Craftin' Up a Storm. I have 5 more farmhouse inspired projects for you. I couldn't fit them all into one video. So hopefully you are inspired to recreate some farmhouse decor for your home. Let's get crafting. For this project, I picked up a candle holder and a birdhouse at Dollar Tree. I found the middle of my birdhouse so I could glue my candle holder right in the center. I'm now using some Dollar Tree craft sticks. I cut the rounded edge off the ends, and then I cut the stick into about 5 pieces. I'm not really measuring exactly. I try and make one piece and use that as a guide to cut the rest. I wanted them to kind of break apart and crack a bit as I was cutting them. But then I also went back in and kind of cracked them and cut the corners off because I want them to look like kind of shabby shingles for my birdhouse roof. I roughed them up a little bit as well with some sandpaper. I glued 4 rows of these shingles on each side. I probably used about 4 or 5 craft sticks. For each side. So I'm gluing down those pieces, and I'm just kind of gluing a small piece and then a little bit bigger piece, and there's my shake roof for my birdhouse. Once that's done, I'm going to paint the birdhouse and the candlestick with a Waverly chalk paint in black. I want to start with a dark bottom undercoat. I did remove the 2 dowels from the front of the birdhouse as well. Those that would be used as the bird perch. I'm going to replace those later. Now, on top of the black paint, I'm going to use the baking soda and ivory paint kind of stucco paste that I make. I just mix some of that baking soda in that ivory paint, and it makes a nice stucco coating. Very similar to what I used in my previous video on those candlesticks. And I just pounce it all over to get a lot of good texture. I still want some of that black to kind of come through a bit, but I will go back in and do a second coat where I need some of that extra texture after I let it dry for a little while. Then I let this set and dry basically at least overnight and get good and hardened. Once it was completely dry, I am going to go in now and distress it. It's pretty tough of a coating, but I go into the corners and I file and I sand as much as I can. In the end, it was just easier to do some faux distressing with some black paint. I distressed it a bit, and then I went over those places that really rubbed out the edges and around the circles for the birdhouse, around the bottom edge, and a few of those ridges around the bottom of the candlestick. And I just accentuated that faux distressing with black paint. Now I'm going to use some stain on the roof shingles. I stained it already a little bit, you can tell, but it wasn't mixed up very well. So now I'm stirring that stain up good to get a good coating onto it. It does soak up pretty well in these wood craft sticks, so it will lighten quite a bit from this. And the stain I'm using is Rust-Oleum in Early Americana. Or Early American. I can't see it from here. Now I'm going to put a nice thick coat of Mod Podge over the top of my birdhouse, just to seal that in. I used the same brush that I used for the stain on my roof. So it had a little bit of that stain still left in it. So you'll see now I have a little bit of a brown tinge to the coating on my birdhouse. But that's okay. I like it. I did cut a couple of twigs down and use those as the perch in the front. And I put a little bit of moss in my birdhouse. And that was it. Let me know what you guys think of this rustic birdhouse. I picked up this great rooster stand sign at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to pop that rooster off the front. I will say I struggled with this a lot. I did end up cracking the edge, but I was able to just glue it back together, and some of the back of the rooster kind of stuck to the back, but since it's on the back, you couldn't really see it. I went over this back piece with a nice coat of black chalk paint. I didn't do the edges, I just did the back. I repaired the front panel, cleaned it really well, and then painted it with some plaster. Now I'm going over it with the antique wax to age that up quite a bit. And then I rub a lot of that off. I do this same technique around the outside of the sign. However, I'm going to put ribbon over it, so it really isn't necessary. I trace out the pattern on some Dollar Tree fabric, and I coat this with Mod Podge and put my fabric piece over the back. You could use scrapbook paper, whichever you like. I just had this really cute farmhouse style fabric. I hot glued my rooster down to the top, and this ribbon I picked up at Home Depot a while ago. It's kind of a burlap-esque cream colored ribbon. I like to use it to put around the edge of the sign to give it a really nice finished edge. And now I'm adding some black ribbon as decoration on top. I just did a simple jute bow, and I popped that on the front of my rooster and trimmed the edges, and he's done. Very simple project, but I like the way this one came out. Let me know what you guys think. What would you have used in the background? This very, very simple frame was so easy to do. I picked up a frame at Dollar Tree and this removable tile decal. I love the frame just as it is. It's distressed, and I didn't do anything to paint it or change it. I popped the back off and got that paper insert and cut around to get one of the tiles off of my decal. Because it's sticky on the back, I went ahead and popped it onto that paper to put back into the frame. There's several different kinds of decals that you can use for this same technique. I just liked this one. It was very simple. Now I want to make a small frame to put over the top of this. A small wreath to put over the top of this frame. So I found a cup that was about the size I wanted it to be and wrapped it around several times, and then did some wire wrapping just to hold those in place and make a little wreath form. I have some of the boxwood greenery from Walmart, and I pulled off some individual pieces The easiest way for me to do it on here, since it's so small, was I cut off that end piece, and then I took some small pieces of floral wire, and I used the floral wire to basically as a twist tie to twist these onto this small frame. I used one on the end, on each end of these pieces, and I kind of overlapped them a little bit so that you couldn't tell where one ends and the other one begins. And see, I just used a small piece of wire, wrapped it through the greenery and around the ring, and then I just twisted it. You can hot glue it, whatever's easiest for you. I just needed a very small wreath, and this was the easiest way to make it. Once my wreath was done, I took a ribbon from Dollar Tree and I glued it to the back of my frame. I guess, yeah, there it is. And I wrapped it around the front and glued it down. And then I glued my little wreath in place and popped a ribbon on the front of that. Very simple, really cute, great for tiered tray decoration. I like the way this one came out. Very inexpensive as well. This next project, I picked up this frame and a metal truck, a windmill welcome sign. I also picked up some of the cotton pods and some chicken wire. This sign is very much like a frame. It just had the metal tabs, and I just popped the back off. And the metal tabs, I pulled those out with some pliers. I cut a piece of chicken wire to go about the size of the frame, and I am just using my stapler and stapling it down. I'm going to trim the edge of that chicken wire down pretty close. And then to make sure there's no sharp places, I'm going to take those wires and kind of twist them down. And then I use a one of the tumbling tower blocks, and I kind of just push it into the edge of that frame. You can run over the back of this with a bead of hot glue, and that will kind of also press those edges down. I put some tape on I pulled the hanger off and put some tape on the back of my truck and filled in those holes with a little bit of the spackling. I'm just going to leave the tape on the back of it, and that'll hold that spackling in place. I ran over it with a coat of black chalk paint and then a coat of agave chalk paint. I also painted the welcome sign. I took that off the windmill and painted the welcome sign. I'm going to distress that truck on all those edges and just kind of get that black chalk paint to show up. And I don't even mind that some of it went down to the metal. I like that look for this truck as well. And I kind of just did the corners. I wanted to add a little rust to really distress this truck up. So I did that mixture of brown, orange, and gold and just did some rust spots where I thought a truck might be rusty. I did this rust technique on the welcome sign and the windmill as well. I'm going to take my windmill and staple it to the back of my frame up at the top so it sticks up off the top. I put a staple down, but then I also put some hot glue to hold it as well. Here is where I'm painting that windmill and the welcome sign. I painted the middle of the windmill with that agave, and then the paddles I did plaster and added the rust around the edges. I left the back ring the same color that it came in. I was fine with that. I'm dry brushing the rust kind of all over those paddles. And here I am adhering my truck and the welcome sign. That welcome sign to me blended too much with the windmill. So I went back and I used some chalk paint in Ocean just to make it stand out a little bit more. I'm not sure how I like it. The white was probably just fine, but I wanted something a little different. So I'm gluing the welcome sign down, and I tucked some of those cotton pods and a few of the farmhouse flowers into the back of my truck, and that's my rustic truck sign. Let me know what you think. For this project, I picked up the bicycle wheel ring from Dollar Tree, and I want to remove that outer ring. So I'm going to grab the spoke and just kind of rock it back and forth with my pliers, and it will pop right off that outer ring. So I do that with all the spokes. Once I have it separated, this spoke, these spokes are going to be my bird cage. So I want to bend those wires and curve them down like a dome shape. I'm supporting the very middle of it with my hand. I don't want these wires to pop off the middle ring, though you can glue them back in if you need to. But if I hold on to it and support it as I'm bending, it helps keep those in place. And I just start at the top and work my way to the end of the wire, curving it down a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going for a rustic look. I want to use that outer circle now for a base, but I need it to be smaller. So I'm going to cut a smaller circle. I'm going to use this wood round as my base for my cage. So I want a piece that I know will go around that. I just wiggle the wire back and forth again and bend and break it. Because their spokes were removed, there's some sharp places, so I just put my pliers over the top of it and twist the wire in the teeth of my pliers, and it grinds those down and takes away those sharp places. I have my circle made, and I'm going to use some E6000 and on the end of each of those wires, and I'm going to hold a piece of floral wire and those two wires together with one hand. And then I'm going to wrap that floral wire around those two wires with my other hand. And this is the process I use for all of the wires on this project. I put some E6000 down and I wrap it good and tight with this floral wire. And this wire's thin enough that it acts kind of almost like string to wrap it around. You can get it good and tight. That E6000 will then solidify and just glue all of these together and make a really good bond. Once I have the wire completely wrapped around, you can trim those edges. But what I like to do, even if I trim them, is I like to take my flat pliers and just smooth that wire end piece around. That will round it around the project, and there won't be any wire bits poking out. Everything will be twisted around. I get the top of my cage and those spokes kind of set about where I want them. The easiest way to do this is to do basically the north, south, east-west. So start with one spoke and then do the opposite on the other side, and then go to the right or left, and then the left or right, and get those anchored down, and then go to the middle spokes in between those, and you'll get them spaced pretty evenly. I held the base ring up against that wire and added some E6000, and now I'm wrapping that floral wire around. I go to one side of the spoke and around that base wire, and then I wrap it up around the other side of the spoke. So I'm crisscrossing it around, and then I go up that wire spoke, and I wrap it back down, and then I go back crisscrossing again. This may be overkill. It may not take this much. It may just take a few wraps of that floral wire around the bottom of it with that E6000, and it may stay in place just fine. And this was the technique I used. It is very sturdy, but it may be a bit of overkill. I just kept crisscrossing back and forth and wrapping it up. I am going to cover this with twine later, so it doesn't bother me that I have a lot of wire wrapping this. I twist the end of that floral wire around and smooth it down. I'm going to show you a little bit more up close view of it. You can see I have all those wires wrapped, and this is my last one. I have some of that E6000 on the bottom, and I'm going to hold that floral wire in place and just wrap up and around one side and hold that wire in place until I get it good and tightened. And then I go up and around the other side, and I just kind of crisscross it. And once I do that a few times, it really holds that wire where I'm wanting it to stay. Now I'm going to paint it, and the formula that I like to use is some medium brown paint, a little bit of orange, and a little bit of gold. And it doesn't matter exactly the shades, just regular brown, regular orange, and gold. And I put those together, and to me, it makes a very rusted finish on this. I'm going to use my large sponge dauber, and I mainly cover that sponge in brown and add a little of that gold and orange in, and I just keep sponging all over. If I need to, I can add in some of that orange or gold with that little sponge. Now I'm going to wrap my base and up my wires with some twine to cover that bottom piece up. You can just wrap the wire area with some twine to cover the floral wire up if you want, or leave it however you want to do it. I'm singeing away those extra fibers, and I have this knob that I picked up in the earlier in the year at Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to pop that on the very top and give my birdcage a decorative top. And now for the base, I'm using that Waverly antique wax. It's my favorite way to stain. I just rub it on and then really kind of buff it in, and I try and make sure to get it really good and in those edges and crevices around the sides. And I just keep rubbing and buffing it until I have it. And I like this wax because it coats and seals that wood as well too. And there's my base. The top just kind of fits snugly right down onto the base. And that's my bird cage. It's kind of short, but rustic, and I think it's cute. Here's all my projects today. Let me know which one was your favorite down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed these projects as much as I enjoyed bringing them to you. Consider hitting that thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. I'd love for you to be part of the crafty family. Have a great day, and as always, keep crafting.